Good morning. It's a privilege to welcome you to today's event, Justice for Ukraine, a conversation with the Ukrainian Prosecutor General. I'm Bill Traynor, Dean and Executive Vice President of Georgetown Law, and I'm honored to be here with you today. We are joined by, and this is really such a great privilege, Andriy Kostin, the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. We are joined as well, and this is really, it's an extraordinary program, by Senator Richard Durbin of Illinois. Senator Durbin is a relentless advocate for America's role in ensuring justice and accountability for war crimes. And we're very proud that he's a graduate of Georgetown Law, class of 1969, and of the School of Foreign Service, class of 1966. We are also joined by Ambassador Ben Schock. The ambassador is Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice at the State Department. We are joined as well by Ambassador Clint Williamson. Ambassador Williamson is the Senior Director for International Justice for the Center on National Security at Georgetown Law. He's the lead coordinator and the co-principal investigator for the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group. We're joined by Anna Cave. Anna Cave is the Executive Director of the Center on National Security at Georgetown Law, and is also the co-principal investigator for the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group. And finally, we're joined by Professor Mitt Regan. Professor Regan is the McDevitt Professor of Jurisprudence and the co-director of the Center on National Security at Georgetown Law and the faculty coordinator for the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group. It's a notable event, not just for Georgetown, but for the international legal community as a whole. Georgetown Law Center on National Security, which is directed by Professor Laura Donahue, houses the top national security law and policy program in the country. And as you'll hear, is taking the lead in helping Ukraine seek justice for the atrocities that have been occurring in that country. The words that we strive to live here at Georgetown Law, they're inscribed on our library. Law is but the means, justice is the end. And for almost a year, events have occurred in the Ukraine that cry out for justice. And I have to say, personally, I had the honor of testifying before the Ukrainian parliament 12 years ago. And my wife and I spent several days in Kyiv, going to the museums, going to the opera, talking to people. And what we were struck by was the optimism and the faith in the future that we heard again and again. And so it's both personally, it's really devastating to see what's going on. And yet I'm not surprised by the resilience that we're seeing from the Ukrainian people. But what we're seeing now is that Russia's invasion and its brutal conduct of the war have left thousands dead, entire cities destroyed, and large numbers of people without heat, water, and the means to meet basic needs. And in addition to the human toll, these events pose a grave threat to the system of international law governing the use of force that was established after World War II. That system was created in the shadow of the millions of lives lost in World War II and lost because of violent state aggression. So it's no exaggeration to say that nothing less than the rule of law itself is at stake in the conflict in Ukraine. So I'm proud to say that Georgetown Law has been chosen to lead a multinational initiative to help the Ukrainian Office of Prosecutor General meet this challenge. This project is the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group, the ACA, which has been established by the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom. And the project is funded by the United States State Department's Department Office of Global Criminal Justice. So in a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Mitt Regan. But before I do, I'd just like to say in closing that we all fervently hope that peace will come to the Ukraine so that the violence and suffering there will end. But peace must include justice. An end to hostilities without accountability for what has occurred in Ukraine would be a hollow peace. Indeed, it would be no sustainable peace at all, for it would only embolden violent aggression in the future. We can't accept the kind of world in which, as the Roman historian Tacitus said of the Roman army, they make a desert and call it peace. As Archbishop Oscar Romero tells us, peace is not the silence of cemeteries. There are now cemeteries in Ukraine, some formal and some makeshift, cemeteries that contain thousands of people who have perished in this conflict. We cannot allow their voices to remain silent. And I'm proud to say that Georgetown Law is doing everything it can to make sure that we will hear the words of those who lie. Professor Regan.
Thank you very much, Dean Traynor, for those opening remarks. I'd like the panelists to come on up and be seated now, I think. We'll begin our conversation. I'm very pleased to be joined here by such distinguished panelists and by Senator Durbin, who, as Dean Traynor has said, is a tireless champion for justice and accountability throughout the world. And we're proud to claim Senator Durbin, who is, as we say at Georgetown, a double Hoya, a graduate both of Georgetown University, as well as its law school. It's now my great honor to introduce Ukraine Prosecutor General Andriy Kostin, who, has Dean Traynor has said, is leading the effort in Ukraine to bring justice and accountability for those who have suffered so much during this armed conflict. I speak for the ACA, Mr. Prosecutor General, and for all of the Georgetown community when I say it is a privilege to be helping you seek justice for the Ukrainian people. So please join me in welcoming Prosecutor General Kostin to Georgetown.
Senator Durbin, Ambassador Van Skak, Ambassador Williamson, Dean Traynor, ladies and gentlemen. Less in a month, it would be 1 year of Russian aggression, full-scale invasion against Ukraine. That, apart from being a flagrant violation of territorial integrity and sovereignty, is characterized by ruthless attacks against civilians and residential areas, along with widespread and systematic atrocities committed by Russian armed forces or illegal formations under their control. There are exceptional efforts undertaken by Ukraine, international institutions such as the International Criminal Court, and singular states to secure effective investigation of the international crimes in order to ensure full accountability. Full accountability of Russian state and individual perpetrators in line with the international law. Our national proceedings cover the crime of aggression, the crime of genocide, and war crimes. Unfortunately, the number of crimes committed are high, partly due to the fact that hostilities take place in urban areas and Russia resorts to prohibited methods of warfare, like weaponizing winter aimed to starve, freeze, and terrorize civilian population in the whole territory of Ukraine. We have now more than 65,000 registered incidents of war crimes. These crimes are not incidental or accidental. They include indiscriminate shelling of civilians, willful killing, torture and ill treatment, conflict-related sexual violence, forced displacement, and pillage on massive scale. Death toll among civilians is over 9,000, and this is what is proved. We know that exact amount is at least several times higher. And from these more than 9,000 Ukrainians killed, 459 are children. Russia's warfare without the rules has caused destruction and damage of more than 75,000 civil infrastructure objects, including residential buildings, medical and educational institutions, cultural heritage. Amid ongoing armed conflict, Russia continues to terrorize civilian population in the whole territory of Ukraine, beyond the territories where the active phase of hostilities is ongoing. Massive missile strikes against cities and critical infrastructure like power plants and grids, water supplies, is not only a direct targeting of civilians and civilian objects that is in itself a clear case of war crime, but part of hybrid warfare policy in order to starve and freeze population in cold winter and to cripple our economy. We have all witnessed with horror evidence of atrocities committed in Bucha, Irpin, Izum, Kharkiv and Kherson regions, and other liberated cities and towns. Mass graves of tortured and butchered civilians and prisoners of war. They are illustrative of a clear policy of persecution, targeting Ukrainians. This pattern of actions has nothing to do with combatants engaged in armed clashes. It depicts a clear line of persecutorial policy against Ukrainians under the pretext of so-called de-Ukrainization incited by Kremlin regime. Forced deportation and transfer, along with the confinement to filtration camps, is also widely employed practice by Russian army. Along with forced adoption process of Ukrainian children in Russia, that is a direct policy aimed to demographic change, cutting out Ukrainian identity. 14,732 forcibly displaced Ukrainian children have been fixed by our Office of Prosecutor General. We definitely know that the exact number is much and much higher. These actions are characteristics of the crime of genocide. Now let me turn to the crime of aggression. History taught us well. It is the waging of aggressive war that leads to war crimes and other mass atrocities. Therefore, it is crucial not only to end the act of aggression, but also to hold masterminds of the supreme international crime fully accountable. Why are we so keen on ad hoc special tribunal for the crime of aggression? Undoubtedly, the starting point in our quest for justice and accountability is the investigation and prosecution of the supreme international crime, the crime of aggression. Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion is a clear example of the act of aggression, whereas the Russian leadership is liable for planning, ordering, and leading it. Although the Prosecutor General Office of Ukraine is open to investigation into this crime, the national justice system is procedurally barred to act with respect to highest leadership of the state, President, Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, due to their personal immunity, which is enjoyed by these officials before the Ukrainian domestic courts. Unfortunately, the International Criminal Court jurisdiction is also limited to the crime of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in our situation, in respect to situation in Ukraine. Similarly, the ICC would be unable to exercise jurisdiction over the crime of aggression via the UN Security Council referral, since Russia, as a permanent member, would definitely veto such opportunity, or I would say at least Russia. Therefore, Ukraine calls for the establishment of the ad hoc special tribunal for the crime of aggression as most feasible and efficient route for accountability. Ukraine's appeal, gaining significant support from the European Union, Council of Europe, and singular states, makes the prospects of the ad hoc special tribunal real. Now is the momentum for the international community to hold Russian aggressors accountable for the most flagrant act committed on European soil since 1945. At the same time, it is important to mention that the International Criminal Court is already here on the ground in Ukraine, investigating crimes. Ukraine believes that active support by the ICC state parties, along with the pledges favoring assistance by non-state parties, would enable the ICC to yield fruitful results. Therefore, we welcome recent amendment to American Service Members Protection Act, securing assistance to the ICC in course of investigation of the situation in Ukraine. There are exceptional efforts undertaken on national level by states individually and jointly in order to investigation and prosecute international crimes committed in Ukraine, such as national investigations opened in 18 states and joint investigative team established by Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, and Romania. Under the auspices of the European Union Agency for Criminal Justice Cooperation, Eurojust, and the ICC being a participant of this joint investigation team as well. Despite the challenges of having access to temporarily occupied territories and places with active phase of hostilities, we have some successful results within the instituted criminal proceedings. There are 256 war crimes suspects in Ukraine and successfully convicted 25 war criminals. Having said so, there are a number of issues whereas we require active support from our friends. IT solutions, development of a central automated case management system that would integrate electronic programs within the Office of Prosecutor General, and law enforcement agencies for effective investigation and prosecution of international crimes. We have initiated the process with the support of European Commission, but further assistance is required. Secure, safe, and adequate working conditions for prosecutors, including funding for Starlink satellite internet systems, reconstructing and restoring damaged and destroyed prosecutors' offices, particularly the ones situated in recently deoccupied territories. And technical support is crucial not to impede accountability process. Our prosecutors often risk their safety and security being at front lines of ongoing armed conflict in order to ensure timely response and secure the crime scene as well as evidences. Situation is further exacerbated by recently intensified massive missile attacks against civil infrastructure that caused severe shortage in electricity, water, and heating. Therefore, prosecutors are forced to work in severe conditions. Now, in course of investigation, access to evidence in temporarily occupied territories still remain a significant challenge. Often, we become aware of the scale of atrocities with the liberation of the territories. At the same time, international crimes are complex and require special expertise and knowledge. We are grateful to our partners for their strategic advice and support, but the needs are there, particularly in the most targeted regions. How can the international community help Ukraine with national prosecution? Investigating a shell building, torture site, or mass grave is a unique and complex task. For this reason, it is vital that Ukrainian investigators and prosecutors receive the technical expertise they need to properly investigate these crimes and hold those responsible to account. This includes the following specialties: physical forensics, ballistics, including missile experts and crater experts, crime scene investigation experts, digital forensics, open source intelligence experts, crime analytics, DNA analysis, forensic interview specialists. From legal perspective, Ukraine needs international humanitarian law and international criminal law specialists to assist with case building and establishing linkage to higher level perpetrators. Crucially, Ukraine needs this support on the ground. Advice sent from abroad or brief visits to Kyiv are beneficial, but they barely scratch the surface of what is truly needed. We need sustained assistance on the ground. The inherent part of accountability is that the responsible party pays financially for the devastation that is caused. Therefore, the reparation of tremendous human and material damage to Ukraine and to Ukrainian people is in line with the rules prescribed under international law, is an important aspect in our quest for justice. Hence, Ukraine is calling for establishment of an international compensation mechanism for full and effective reparation of harm suffered from Russia, as well as military and political elite of Russia involved in the aggressive war. We need for the creation of such mechanism, along with the international register of damage, would open the window of opportunity in this direction. Equally important is the effective sanctions regime for seizing and confiscating assets of Russia, individuals and entities directly engaged in supporting or aiding Russian policy of aggressive war, including political and military elite, proxies, and oligarchs. We closely follow efforts undertaken by the US government and the Senate in this direction. The latest sanctioning of the Wagner Group as a transnational criminal organization being a much needed decision. All our outstanding efforts raised the question, why is it important for my office to be taking the lead in investigating and prosecuting these crimes? Ukraine and Ukrainian people continue to stand strong. Our spirit of resistance and resilience is evident in battlefield and at the legal front. That is why we strongly believe that there is no victory without justice. Ukraine firmly believes in mobilizing international and national institutions to impose accountability on Russian state and individual perpetrators in line with the rules of international law. There should be no safe havens for the perpetrators of international crimes committed in Mariupol, Bucha, Irpin, Izum, Kharkiv, Kherson, and many other towns in Ukraine. Hence, from the very beginning, our primary task has been to create a web of accountability centered on state responsibility and individual criminal responsibility by utilizing international and national mechanisms, as well as creating new instruments if need arises. Ukraine's victory in war will not only securing our sovereignty and freedom, but allow us to uphold democracy and good governance in rule of law based system. We would not be able to achieve success without support from our partners and friends. With this, let me express my deep gratitude for the unwavering support we witness from the United States, American people, and all stakeholders involved. Thank you for your attention.
It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who's going to introduce someone. My good friend and colleague, Laura Donahue, here, who's our visionary founder and director of our National Security Center on National Security, will introduce Senator Durbin.
It's my great pleasure to welcome Senator Dick Durbin back to Georgetown Law. Since graduating, he has become one of the country's most important leaders and an inspiration for the students who have followed him. Senator Durbin embodies Georgetown's defining values of public service, social justice, and rule of law. He began his life in public service in 1983 as a member of the US House of Representatives. He ran on a platform dedicated to reducing unemployment and alleviating the financial difficulties facing farmers in rural Illinois. He went on to win re-election 6 more times. In 1996, he was elected to the US Senate, where he continued to have an enormous impact. For 18 years, he has served as a Democratic whip. In the powerful Appropriations Committee, he has served as the chair of the Subcommittee on Defense, which controls nearly half of the United States' annual discretionary budget. For 22 years, he served on the Judiciary Committee and is now the chair. Throughout his public service, Senator Durbin has been a champion and defender of human rights, both at home and abroad. He is the founding chair of the Judiciary's Human Rights and the Law Subcommittee, and he's a longtime champion of comprehensive immigration reform and one of the sponsors of the Bipartisan DREAM Act, which gave immigrants who grew up in the United States a path to citizenship. He was the first member of Congress to call on the Obama administration to end the deportation of Dreamers, and he successfully pressed the administration on DACA. In 2011, he held the first ever hearing in Congress on the rights of Muslim Americans. Senator Durbin's commitment to human rights extends well beyond the United States. He's shown longstanding support for and solidarity with Ukraine. In September of this year, he led a bipartisan initiative to introduce the Non-Recognition of Russian Annexation of Ukrainian Territory Act. That bill would require that US foreign policy not recognize any Russian claim of sovereignty over any portion of the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. When introducing the bill, Senator Durbin did not mince his words. I quote, "The world knows the war in Ukraine is a disaster, and increasingly, so do the Russian people, who are tired of their kids dying over Putin's warped nostalgia for Soviet dystopia. Today's bill reaffirms our commitment to the Ukrainian people that the United States will never recognize sovereign Ukrainian territories as part of Russia," end quote. Following Ukraine President Zelensky's address this past December to a joint session of Congress, Senator Durbin again expressed his strong support, saying for 10 months, the Ukrainian people have put up a valiant fight against Russia's renewed aggression, and that few thought they could win, but here they are today, still standing. Today's address calls on Congress to do everything we can to provide Ukrainian people with additional aid to fight back. That morning, Senator Durbin's Justice for Victims of War Crimes Act had passed the Senate unanimously. That bill updates the current war crimes statute to enable prosecution of war criminals, regardless of the location or the target of their activities. It also extends the statute of limitations for war crimes discovered years after they actually occur. These initiatives are the latest in a long line of human rights measures that Senator Durbin has sponsored, such as the bipartisan Child Soldiers Accountability Act and the Genocide Accountability Act. And he's engaged in ongoing efforts to address remaining accountability gaps, particularly in the Crimes Against Humanity Act. Finally, Senator Durbin's values really reflect in his commitment to the rule of law. He's been immensely successful in protecting rights at the heart of our Constitution. In addition to his work on social justice and human rights, this year he's chairing the Senate Judiciary Committee as it considers whether to renew Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and whether to extend protections to programs that have hitherto operated outside any statutory provisions under Executive Order 12333. He has long been a staunch supporter of citizens' rights and held the executive branch to account for constitutional values that we hold most dear. Senator Durbin, you embody the spirit of Georgetown law. We thank you, and I thank you for your public service, your commitment to social justice, and your embrace of the rule of law. Welcome back.
Well, it's all true. Laura, thanks for that generous introduction. If my mother were alive, she would consider your praise entirely appropriate. And if some of my professors from this law school could hear it, they would be aghast. Thanks, Dean Traynor, for opening up this forum, this historic and important forum, and to everyone at the Center on National Security for organizing this conversation. It's a hopeful sign to see so many here on a Wednesday morning, joining in support of our friends in Ukraine. We have a special guest, of course, with Prosecutor General Kostin. I thank him for being here and for those who accompany him, including his family. Thanks to him for leading the fight for democracy and global security. As we say in Ukrainian village in Chicago, Slava Ukraini. Later today, I'll be hosting a meeting with the Prosecutor General and several of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. It'll be a chance to show our nation's support for Ukraine is bipartisan and really reflects the courage and determination of the people of Ukraine. There's not much consensus in Washington these days, but when it comes to Ukraine, we are united. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle understand that Russia's illegal invasion is not just a threat to Ukraine, it's a threat to every free nation on earth. So here in America, we need to do our part to support Ukraine, and that includes bringing Russian war criminals to justice. It's been 49 weeks since Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Do you remember the headlines from the early days? I remember the predictions by our intelligence agencies that Kyiv would fall in just a few days. Well, here we are 1 year later. Kyiv is still standing. That's first and foremost because of the leadership of President Zelensky and the unbelievable courage of the Ukrainian freedom fighters. But it's also because of the unified and resolute Western response to Russia's invasion. At every stage of this conflict, the United States and its NATO allies have come to Ukraine's side. We've imposed crushing sanctions on Russia, provided billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine, from munitions to medical supplies, you name it. Just last week, the US and Germany announced they would send nearly 36 tanks to the front lines and more to follow. And nobody has been watching the Western response closer than Vladimir Putin himself. He has utterly failed in his efforts to divide NATO. He knows our resolve is stronger today and stronger with each Ukrainian victory. The notion of expanding NATO, which I fully support, to include Sweden and Finland, should be a clear message to Putin that his strategy has failed if he thought he would weaken our alliance. That's why fairly early in the conflict, Putin made a harrowing calculation. He believes his last hope for winning this war is terrorizing and brutalizing the Ukrainian people into submission. Over the past year, Vladimir Putin has turned 8 million Ukrainians, almost 1/5 of the country's population, into refugees. He's reduced entire cities to rubble. And worst of all, he has condoned the torture and murder of civilians. With every territory Ukraine has reclaimed, from Bucha to Izium, we've seen the same scenes. Mass graves, bodies with skulls crushed, faces mutilated beyond recognition. Last year, Prosecutor General Kostin told me his office had documented more than 50,000 war crimes since the invasion began, and this morning he tells us the number is over 65,000. So as Putin continues his campaign of brutality, it's imperative that the United States not only provide military resources to the people of Ukraine, but legal resources as well. We have a responsibility to hold Putin and his henchmen accountable for every single war crime they have committed. And this is not merely an American responsibility. It is an American legacy. Last Friday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day, a day during which we all solemnly pledge never again and recommit ourselves to a mission America started in 1945 with the Nuremberg trials. When the trials were first convened at the Palace of Justice in Bavaria, it marked a watershed in the history of the world. 6 months after the last concentration camp was liberated, the most powerful nations in the world joined together, not to exact revenge, but to deliver justice. In the words of Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson, who served as America's chief prosecutor, the Nuremberg trials were, quote, one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason. I did a little homework yesterday. I wonder what the justice said in his opening remarks at Nuremberg. You can find them, as I told the ambassador earlier. They're lengthy, but well worth reading if you can. Early in his statement on November 21st, 1945, at the Nuremberg Tribunal, Justice Jackson laid out the basis, the jurisdiction, the rationale for what was going to occur. And he referred to a document that I had never seen or paid attention to. It's called the Moscow Declaration. The Moscow Declaration was handed down in October of 1943. I'd like to read several sections of it because I'd like to tell you at the outset that it was signed by President Franklin Roosevelt, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. In this Moscow Declaration of October 1943, they spelled out what would happen to Hitler and his Nazis at the end of the war. And I'd like to read a part of it just to give you an idea of what they envisioned, and I'd like you to think about it in comparison historically to where we are today. It says, at the time of granting of any armistice to any government which may be set up in Germany, those German officers and men and members of the Nazi Party who have been responsible for or have taken a consenting part in the above atrocities, massacres, and executions will be sent back to the countries in which their abominable deeds were done in order that they may be judged and punished according to the laws of these liberated countries and of free governments which will be erected therein. Germans who take part in wholesale shooting of Polish officers and the execution of French, Dutch, Belgian, Norwegian hostages, or who have harmed or have shared in slaughters inflicted on the people of Poland or the territories of the Soviet Union, which are now being swept clear of the enemy, will know they will be brought back to the scene of their crimes and judged on the spot by the people who have been outraged. Let those who have hitherto not imbued their hands with innocent blood beware lest they join the ranks of the guilty. That's a statement by Joseph Stalin, Franklin Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill when the war was far from over and the outcome was not that clear. And they made it clear as well that at the end of this war, they would prevail and those who were responsible for the war crimes would be held accountable. We should today hold the Russians to the same standards they held the Nazis to in World War II, nothing less. Justice Jackson recognized that the best corrective to brutish lawlessness of the Nazi regime was the rule of law. And that principle, defending human rights through the rule of law, has served as the bedrock of a post-war alliance. Unfortunately, in recent years, America has fallen short of defending that principle. Time and again, we have failed to hold war criminals accountable. Some, astonishingly, have even found safe haven on American soil. Why is that? Well, it's the result of glaring loopholes in our criminal law. Previously, the narrow jurisdiction of the War Crimes Act and the lack of a crime against humanity statute entirely provided war criminals a free pass in our country. For years, I have worked to close these loopholes and ensure our nation lives up to that promise of Nuremberg. But I must admit, it's sometimes been a lonely crusade on Capitol Hill. Currently, I serve as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The first time I held a gavel on the committee was actually 16 years ago when I chaired Congress's first ever subcommittee on human rights and the law. We formed that subcommittee to protect human rights here at home and around the world. And over the years, we've won some bipartisan victories. The Genocide Accountability Act of 2007, which granted the Department of Justice power to prosecute war criminals on American soil who had participated in genocide. The Child Soldiers Accountability Act of 2008, which made it a crime under U.S. law to recruit or use child soldiers. The Human Rights Enforcement Act of 2009, which authorized an office at the Justice Department to focus on prosecuting modern war crimes. But since then, we've had few victories to speak of. The students here today are undoubtedly, probably too young to have known Father Robert Dryden. I hope you have heard the name. He was a professor here at Georgetown Law and one of America's great champions of human rights. Years before he died, Father Dryden wrote an article in which he argued that defending human rights is not only America's responsibility, it is our destiny. Well, when you believe that, as I do, it puts each legislative loss into historic context. We don't fight for human rights because it's easy. We do it because it's right. It's our destiny, no matter how long it takes. Now, fast forward 15 years, after I first formed that subcommittee on human rights, a foreign president who until last year was little known, flew to Washington. It was late last December, and it came before the Senate, just before we were going to adjourn for the year. I had an opportunity to shake hands with the president. I told him at the time when I introduced myself, I'd met him once before, but I introduced myself and I said, I'm the senator from Ukrainian Village, which some of you from Chicago know as a section of the city. And he smiled and said, I know Ukrainian Village. Days before the Senate was set to adjourn, before we left for the holidays, we heard from President Zelensky. Speaking before Congress, he reminded us of our history, defending freedom and human rights. He reminded us that today, Ukrainians are fighting for the same freedoms Americans founders fought for in 1776. And President Zelensky also reminded us that America has the power to, quote, bring to justice everyone who started this unprovoked and criminal war. He is right. And whether or not we exercise that power will define the world for my grandchildren and all of your children that they will grow up in. President Zelensky's message to Congress came at the exact moment we needed to hear it. Just hours after he spoke, the Senate voted to pass the Justice for Victims of War Crimes Act. This bipartisan bill, which I introduced with Senator Chuck Grassley, finally closes a loophole in our criminal code that has enabled foreign war criminals to evade justice. Let me give you a specific example. In 2004, a man named Marko Boskic was discovered living in Massachusetts. He had participated in the genocide in Srebrenica in Bosnia. But when he was found by US authorities, he wasn't charged with a war crime or a crime against humanity. He was charged with visa fraud because our laws did not provide jurisdiction over foreign war criminals or crimes against humanity. Here's the good news. With the Justice for Victims of War Crimes Act, we closed that loophole. Now, no war criminal like Marko Baskic will ever be able to use America as a safe haven. It goes to show that our bipartisan support for Ukraine will leave behind a lasting legacy. While Russia's invasion was the impetus for finally passing the law, it will remain on the books long beyond our victory in Ukraine. It's a crucial victory, but we have more work to do. We need to seize the momentum to close the remaining gap in our laws for crimes against humanity. We need to join the world in ensuring that Russia's leadership is held accountable for the crime of aggression as well. And really, what I want to close with is this. The path to justice can be long and lonely, but don't ever think that our work is futile. In a closely divided Congress, we came together on a bipartisan basis to live up to the promise of Nuremberg. We enacted a measure that will deliver justice to the Ukrainian families who have been displaced, brutalized, and terrorized. And now we need to keep moving forward. We need all of you to enter the arena, join the fight for human rights at home and around the world. Thank you.
Senator, thank you for your inspiring words. We're going to move to a panel discussion here in a moment, if I don't electrocute myself. But first, I want to acknowledge two members of the Office of Prosecutor General who have accompanied Prosecutor General Kostin to visit. Zurab Adashvili. And Maxime Popov. George. All right, we're going to have a bit more of an informal conversation now among the panelists. And Mr. Prosecutor General, I thought I would begin with you. You've described some of what's been occurring in Ukraine, the atrocities. We read the news, hear the reports, and so forth. But would you tell us, what is it your investigators are seeing when they go out to these sites that we know of as Bucha or Izium or Mariupol, Kharkiv, Kherson, particularly areas that have been liberated from Russian occupation? Your investigators on the ground, what are they seeing when they go to those sites?
Of course, it's a very difficult work, because when they see day after day the bodies of people who were killed, were tortured before killing, bodies of children, of course it's difficult. And some of our colleagues, they feel not very safe at that moment. All of our leaders of all departments, heads of all departments, they know that they need to look at their stuff. And if they see and feel that someone is not in a very stable condition, to rotate them. This is first, because this is from what people say me who are there every day. It's difficult to see it one time, but when you work with this every day, it's much more difficult. And the other thing we all see is the same pattern. First, mass atrocities were found near Kyiv. When Kyiv was liberated, it was like 1 month and 1 week after full-scale invasion started. So this territory was under temporary occupation for 1 month. So these types of crimes were committed and found before on the territories of Kharkiv region, Chernihiv region, because there were parts of Ukrainian territory which were occupied and then deoccupied during first months. And there were the same crimes, the same sexual violence, the same killing of civilians. But they were, not on a massive scale. And the active war was at that time, at that territory. So it was not a time to analyze and to what was going on at that. These crimes were just fixed and documented as they are. Then first mass atrocities, Bucha, 1 month of occupation. Kharkiv was liberated in September. So after 7 months of temporary occupation. And we saw the same. And when we saw that the same pattern, the same crimes were committed against civilians, forensics, its analysis of bodies, and we found the same crimes from March, April, May, June. So the most important word is pattern. And then we start to understand, and the same was in Kherson in October, in Kherson region. So the most important word is pattern. They do the same. They conduct the same crimes, whatever territory is, whatever division of their armed forces is. And this lead us to a conclusion that this is not an occasion. It's not because, some 10 people become crazy and go and commit these atrocities. It's because this is a pattern not only of conducting, but also to initiating these crimes, because the idea behind, as I understand, was to terrorize population, was to demolish any potential resistance of any type, by words or by actions of any person on the occupied territory.
Thank you. And as you say, it's particular individuals necessarily, but there is a pattern which suggests that this is coming from higher levels, right? So how are you going about trying to bring cases based on command responsibility, beyond simply prosecuting individual perpetrators?
This is a great question, since we have no direct clause in our criminal code with regard to command responsibility. So for such cases, the ICC should play a complementary role. And though we have very deep discussions with our partners from the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group and their strategic advice with regard to how to imply some of these cases by using the possibility or opportunities of of Ukrainian domestic law. So this is second. Third, of course, even if we will have the legal possibility to indict all command chain. The most challenging story is find evidences. And this is the most difficult. Just for you to explain, the residential houses, the critical civil infrastructure is destroyed massively by air missiles, which are launched very far from Russian-Ukrainian border, so at Russian territory. So the aircraft just go up and launch a missile, and then it goes as it is, like by coordinates with some route which is like pre-programmed by the person who input these coordinates, who proposed and somehow fix this route. And because it's not just go directly, they also try to make the work of our air defense forces more difficult. And the one who just pushed the button this is a discussion. Is this officer liable for war crimes? We need to prove it, because he may say that I've been given coordinates and I've been said by my commander that this is the coordinates of some military object. So what we did now, we informed about suspicion the colonel of who is the head of one of the Air Force unit, because as we know from our intelligence, this is the only unit which has specific missile in their possession. And these specific missiles were destroyed several civil objects. So this is makes it possible for us to inform this person about suspicion, because it's definitely could not be without his command. But the other command chain, it's a challenge, and without good results of intelligence, it will be very difficult to find out the command chain. What could be helpful when we liberate some territories? We have good communication with our armed forces. We ask them to preserve all evidences, because this could be a written document about their armed forces, and we have some of them. This can help us to build cases.
Ambassador Van Schaak, you have many years of experience in this field. How do you situate these prosecutorial efforts on the part of Ukraine within the larger sort of international criminal justice system, right? Some have said from the beginning, all war crimes should be investigated by the ICC or some independent tribunal for some of them. And we'll get to the independent tribunal on aggression in a moment. But more generally, how do you see domestic prosecution fitting into that larger sort of framework?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for being here, and to the Center for organizing. This is a terrific event, and I'm really honored to serve here on the panel with old colleagues and new colleagues. It's incredible to see the international community activating a whole range of accountability mechanisms in response to Russia's full-scale invasion. And Ukraine itself has been incredibly adept at utilizing lawfare as part of a sort of kaleidoscopic defensive maneuvers, using literally any legal fora that is available to them. So the International Court of Justice, the ICC, the Law of the Sea Tribunal, its own domestic courts, and then now being part of this joint investigative team that some Europeans have joined in order to facilitate the sharing of information. So Europe is increasingly interlinked now, their criminal justice systems, including through the Eurojust Genocide Network. But this JIT will remove even whatever friction might have been left to any sort of sharing. But so in some respects, this is very new to see this enormous ecosystem forming with all of these different nodes all working towards the same end. But we've been talking a little bit about Nuremberg, and I think it's important to recognize that this idea of complementarity has always been fundamental to the field. So even at Nuremberg, while we tend to focus on the Nuremberg Tribunal and then the Tokyo Tribunal in the Pacific Theater, there were at the time still hundreds of cases that went forward in domestic courts, in occupation courts, in local courts, doing this sort of division of labor between the cases that had no geographic location, which is how the Nuremberg statute described it, and then those other cases that were more localized. And so we're seeing that reproduced here with the ICC engaged, potentially doing crimes against humanity cases, command responsibility cases, because those legal principles don't exist in Ukrainian law, whereas really the front line of this work is going to be this man and his team, who are here, many of whom, who really have the primary responsibility for doing these cases. And that's why this atrocity crimes advisory group that Georgetown is engaged in is so important, because, you know, the bulk of the work is going to be here in domestic courts.
Thank you. As Prosecutor General, I could just ask you an additional question. Why do you think it's important for Ukraine to have a role in this international criminal justice center? This is what we call a softball question. I mean,
I don't actually think that this this question could whenever arise, because for Ukrainians, but maybe because we are here. For Ukrainians, it's obvious because Ukraine is a victim of this war. As I said many times, every Ukrainian is a victim of what Putin and his team did. Ukraine is doing now. So it's important for Ukrainians to receive justice. And we all understand that 99% of all cases will be prosecuted in Ukraine and will go to Ukrainian courts. This is what history says. And it's also very important because starting from 24th of February, all state authorities in Ukraine worked every day, never stopped. This is very important. So if we work, we need to deliver justice to our people. All our partners and all other instruments, in any case, would be complementary. But being complementary, they may play a crucial role in order to, first, to restore the world order. If we are talking about punishing of the highest military and political leadership of Russia for the waging of aggressive war. Because we can't leave situation as it is. If aggressor start aggression and if there is no valid, effective instruments to punish, we need to invent this instrument together and punish the aggressor. Not only for this aggression, but to deter any other aggressor at any other place or time in the future. Then, of course, the instruments of International Criminal Court. When we can't take this case, or we can't, there are really big cases. The cases of genocide, big challenge, and a lot of international element, and a lot of international experts to be involved, and protection to witnesses, and possible protection to, people who would be charged. Because we try, I will tell you, we try to find some people in Russia who committed war crimes and who were ready to go and to admit. It's difficult. And if we will be happy with these cases, these people should be also protected. And the ICC is the best possible way to do it, because we need witnesses, real witnesses, as more as we can get. So genocide or crimes against humanity or crimes with regard to territories which are not under our control, because for many reasons, other states and their intelligence institutions could be more complementary and friendly with regard to the ICC as an international institution than with regard to my office, for many reasons. Karim Khan knows that it doesn't matter for us, for me, with whom intelligence community will share evidences, with his office or with mine. It's important for us to have this. And if this case will go through the ICC, it's for the sake of justice for Ukrainians. So central role is because we, Ukraine, are the victim, and we, Ukraine, must deliver justice to our people. And central role is not a role alone. We can't deliver justice alone, and we need unity of the lawyers, not only our respected experts. And I'm really grateful for Clint's team and his devotion, to Anna and to Georgetown for taking this case. We really rely on our future cooperation because we know how close we are in understanding our needs and instrument that could be delivered by Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group, by Georgetown, by all of our partners and experts. But talking here before you as a lawyers, I just want to say that only lawyers understand what is justice. People just feel justice. Everyone, how he or she feel it. But only lawyers understand what justice is. And lawyers understand how justice is important for people. Many people, they can receive justice and even don't pay attention to it. But lawyers know how justice is important, because justice is something which is inside our souls and hearts. And even if people can't explain in legal terms what it is, if they feel it, they are happy. And we all fight for people to be happy, to have a right and possibility to become happy. This is important for all of us. May I use one more minute?
Please.
This is maybe important, especially in US. You know that legal practice and lawyers' work is always goes close to money. Money is very important because this is the result. This is also about justice. You work hard, you get more. But sometimes when I spoke with young lawyers in Ukraine before the war, and I talked with them about independence. You know, this is crucial for any lawyer. And of course, you know, external independence and internal independence, which is a challenging story. And many of them, they were surprised that I told them that the internal independence includes independence from money. And this is very important because lawyers, from my point of view, of all democratic world at the moment, they can play more important role than they play now. To deliver justice, to forget, I don't know, 5% or 10% of their time about money, and to understand that they can do something for purpose of justice on global level. I understand now during my visit here, my second visit to US, that there is a lot to do with regard to engagement of international lawyers community to help all of us to return justice to Ukraine and return justice to the world.
Thank you for those powerful words, Mr. Prosecutor General. And I think we would like to invite you to come each year to speak to our incoming first-year students to inspire them.
I have this speech here.
Convince them. So if you could check their calendar. I want to turn to Clint and Anna in just a moment because of their extensive experience, but I want to come back to Ambassador Van Schaak on a very specific question. What is your thinking about the calls for an independent tribunal to adjudicate a claim of aggression by Russia?
Indeed, this is an extremely high priority for Ukraine. You obviously articulated it quite powerfully here, and your president has as well. And in many respects, it's so obvious that Russia's engagement in Ukraine is a manifest violation of the UN Charter. It's a series of acts of aggression committed through the perpetration of war crimes. So aggression is the so-called original sin, right, that opened the door to all of the other war crimes and atrocities that we're seeing being committed on the territory of Ukraine. And yet, as you note, the International Criminal Court is foreclosed from exercising jurisdiction over acts of aggression committed in Ukraine because of some idiosyncratic jurisdictional rules that govern the amendments to the ICC statute that were put in place after the Kampala review conference. Either both Ukraine and Russia would have had to have ratified those new amendments. And of course, that has not come to pass. So the ICC is foreclosed. So this has given rise to a number of proposals to consider how the crime of aggression might be dealt with in the service of this vision of comprehensive justice, of full justice, full accountability that Ukraine has articulated. And so we're now in a situation in which I think much of the world is considering some of the proposals that are happening. There was a meeting last week of legal advisors, for example. A couple of different models have emerged. And so this is very much now a question of institutional design. One of the models would involve something akin to the Nuremberg Tribunal, so an international agreement that states could join across the globe that would create a standalone institution that could exercise jurisdiction over the full range of potential perpetrators of Russia's aggression. And it's defined, the crime is defined as a leadership crime. So if you look at Article 8 bis of the ICC statute, only those who are in a position to control, execute, design, plan acts of aggression are generally going to be prosecuted before the ICC, at least, for the crime of aggression. And no head of state immunity, according to international criminal law doctrine, would necessarily apply at a truly international tribunal. At the other end of the spectrum, you have more of a hybrid model that you could imagine creating, which would be either a Ukrainian court or some sort of European regional court that could also exercise jurisdiction over the crime of aggression. If it's a purely Ukrainian court, you do have the lingering problem of head of state immunity, as you've acknowledged. And so that's one of the detriments. But you can also imagine creating an institution that could live for some time for when there is a political transformation within Russia, such that individuals who are now enjoying head of state immunity as part of the so-called troika, head of government, head of state, et cetera, would no longer enjoy that. The Dutch have put forward an extremely helpful and constructive proposal, which would be to create an interim prosecutor's office that could start to collect not only evidence of acts of aggression, which frankly is on our front pages every day, but the more difficult point, which you've identified, which is who beyond the troika should be held responsible if we proceed with aggression as a leadership crime. And how far down do we go? Do we stay in the political side? Do we also potentially indict senior leaders on the military side? Is it 5 additional people? Is it 15 additional people? Those are sort of open questions. And that's where I think an interim prosecutor's office could help to lay the groundwork for future prosecutions. So while the international community is grappling with what the modality or mechanism would be, what type of court, where it should be formed, using what instrument, is it a treaty-based, is it an agreement with Ukraine, is it new legislation domestically, this interim prosecutor's idea that would be hosted by the Netherlands, I think will start to move us forward in terms of preserving evidence and coming up with theories of responsibility that could be deployed when there is a forum with jurisdiction.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. Very thoughtful position, I think. So Clint and Anna, you are the two that have the closest contact with the Office of Prosecutor General on this project. And you also have experience in this field. Clint, let me start with you. You were the U.S. Ambassador for Global Criminal Justice. You have been a prosecutor for decades in the international criminal arena, the ICTY, for instance. You've been involved in other tribunals. How do the efforts to provide accountability for Ukraine compare to what you've encountered in previous work? And what kind of challenges, what kinds of lessons do you think that we can draw?
As you said, I've been doing this a long time, almost 30 years now. And over that period, I've been involved in either small ways or large in responding to almost every mass atrocity event that's occurred. What stands out to me about the situation in Ukraine, and it's a point that was alluded to by Ambassador von Skok and the prosecutor, is this issue of complementarity, the role of the ICC, the role of domestic courts. This is really a unique situation. The more common scenario that we have seen, many times over is like what has happened in Syria or in Myanmar, where you have neither an international option for accountability or a domestic. International options have been foreclosed because Russia or China exercises a veto at the UN Security Council, or there's no other means for an international court to exercise jurisdiction. Domestic options have been foreclosed because in those countries, of course, the government is opposed to any sort of accountability because they themselves are complicit in crimes. So what we have in Ukraine, though, is both of these options available. The International Criminal Court has the ability to exercise jurisdiction, and you have a domestic capability, which is very strong and has the legal jurisdiction to act. So why is this significant? It's significant because it has allowed for a real-time response to these crimes. More often what we see is a historical effort to go back, reconstruct evidence, and build cases months or years after the fact. The closest we've probably come to this was the work that the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, the ICTY, did in 1999 in Kosovo. And I ran the field operations for those investigations as the war was going on. There you had an international tribunal created by the UN Security Council with all of these theoretical authorities for state cooperation. And we were still unable to get on the ground in Kosovo as crimes were happening. We were operating in Albania and Macedonia. We were only able to go in when the war was over. NATO troops went into the country and then we were able to get on the ground and conduct investigations. What we've seen in Ukraine, though, is the ability of this very capable prosecutor's office in a democratically elected government to go in, conduct investigations and prosecutions as these crimes are occurring. We were able, as the international community, to go in and start engaging with them from day one. I went out a week after the war started and started meeting with the OPG on the Polish-Ukrainian border. We started working with them very early on. This is really unprecedented. And then I think it's also just worth noting that what we're doing here at Georgetown on this is really something that's a cutting edge issue. I've now been involved in probably, I think this is the 6th operation like this in an ongoing conflict or post-conflict, where I've had an oversight role of a large kind of investigative or prosecutorial operation. Every one of these in the past has been done through the UN, US government, or the European Union. Here you have an academic institution taking a lead on this in partnership with governments. We're working with the US government closely, with the Office of Global Criminal Justice at State, with the European Union and the United Kingdom. But we're at the tip of the spear on this, and we're able to go in and engage in a way that hasn't been done in the past. And just sort of to wrap this up, why that's important is because we have seen over time an evolution in how international criminal justice works. I started at the very beginnings of the ICTY in 1994, as soon as it became operational. These were in the halcyon days of international justice, right after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when international cooperation was at its highest level. We're not there anymore. I mean, now what is more common is any effort at justice gets blocked in the UN Security Council. It's difficult to get consensus, even within the European Union, regional organizations, certainly in the UN. So we are having to look at other options for delivering justice. And the work that Georgetown is doing right now is something that's incredibly innovative. As I said, it's cutting edge, but I think we're able to go in this partnership with governments and make a huge impact in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. And Anna, you have experience in this field from the State Department, Office of Global Criminal Justice, from the National Security Council, at the Holocaust Museum, all on atrocity, prevention, and accountability. What do you see as ways in which this project is innovative in addition to what Clint has described?
Yeah, and just to build on what I think Clint has really laid out very, very well, I think there are a couple of aspects. Beth, you highlighted the institutional design. I think what we're seeing now is really the creation of a new design, a new model, because we can't turn to the UN. This would normally be done through a much more kind of centralized effort. We don't have that option. So where do we turn next? And that, I think, is what Clint helped develop in the early days, and with the support of the Office of Global Criminal Justice, we've been able to scale up here at Georgetown. And that is bringing multidisciplinary experts in real time through a flexible approach. We have our team sitting in Kyiv, in an office space in Kyiv on Maidan Square. And you heard from the prosecutor, it's a whole range of kinds of expertise that we need. It's not just lawyers. Lawyers, are at the front end, investigators, prosecutors, military analysts, but we also need scientists and engineers. We were talking with Max about how you go about investigating and building the evidence base for environmental harms. We need to work with the EPA. We need psychosocial support for building a victim and witness support program. We need doctors who are experienced in evaluating victims of conflict-related sexual violence. So there's a whole range of expertise that we need. And what we're building is this hub that we can go out and find that global expertise, bring them on board at Georgetown, deploy them in real time to Kyiv, also do a lot of remote work, which is amazing. I think we're on Zoom 8 hours a day with people from all over the world. And we get to also have the benefit of an army of research assistants here at Georgetown, which I'm really grateful for, as well as all of the administrative staff in the background. This is sometimes unromantic. How do you actually get people on the ground safely? How do you provide them with insurance? How do you hire them, given international labor laws? All these pieces really are part of this new institutional design. But what I think it does is also enables us to respond not just more quickly, it's actually much more cost effective, right? The ICTY, I think, cost about $700 million in its first decade. The ICC in its first decade cost $900 million. So the inputs, while seemingly substantial, a $10 million grant from the State Department, is actually pretty cost effective. The other thing I would note is that it's really that we are potentially building a model that we could use elsewhere. I think we're seeing this across the board, where you've already heard we are breaking new ground together with our Ukrainian colleagues on international law, on institutional design. So I'm excited to see what might be possible there. The last thing that I would say is innovative here, and it's probably, in my view, the most important, I think one of the lessons from the last 20, 30 years of international justice is that it's important that we don't, as decision makers sitting in Washington, even sitting in Kyiv, don't make these decisions in a vacuum. We actually need to consult with the people who are most affected. We need to talk to communities. We need to talk to families, to people who've lost loved ones, and get an understanding of what is most important to them. So one of the things I'm probably most excited about is we are working to design a quantitative and qualitative survey throughout Ukraine, a nationwide survey, so that we can actually collect the inputs of what people want on the front end, not after the fact. And I think I'm hopeful that that data, that information, can really help us set priorities. Which cases are most important? What kinds of justice are people most interested in? Is it reparations? Is it finding their loved one? And so I'm excited about really setting a gold standard. Beth jokingly said yesterday, but I'm going to take it to heart. We're going to set the Georgetown protocol for this. So, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can, bring these tools to bear, bring the lessons from the last 30 years, and then also take those forward. One of the lasting legacies that you will leave, Mr. Prosecutor, is helping us forge this and then taking it to other countries. People are going to be coming and knocking on your door, just like we did in Bosnia and Croatia in December, asking them, what were your lessons in setting up a victim and witness support system? People will come and knock on your door. How did you do this? So we're excited to partner with you in that.
Wonderful. Ambassador Van Schaak, I'd like to invite you to, if you would, just to make a few concluding remarks, putting the ACA as you see it sort of in context, what its promise is, what its needs are, what are the challenges going forward, based on your extensive experience.
Yeah, I think Anna's exactly right that this is a new model that I think I think you described it as building an airplane while you're on the runway taking off. So there's, lots to be worked out. And I just want to say to the students in the room, what an amazing opportunity this is for you to see justice being pursued in real time. And I take your remarks to heart. I hope that all of you go out and find a career that every morning you wake up, you think, I can't wait to see what I can do today to advance this mandate of justice. And then when you go to bed at night, you think, thank heavens I was there because I was able to make that contribution, even if it was one sentence in a huge interagency meeting. Your role in that room is to say that one sentence and to preserve a point or to push the conversation in another direction. So really I hope you can be motivated by a true calling and not just by other things that might motivate others around you. But in terms of what the ACA is producing, I think in many respects, this is remaking the field of international justice. It's showing the level of coordination across the globe, but also, and we haven't really had a chance to chat about this, but figuring out how to integrate reams and terabytes of digital evidence that is coming in on a daily basis. This will be the most documented crime base in human history. And the challenge now is sifting through all of that digital information, finding the best evidence, and then putting it to the service of justice. And we got a briefing yesterday by one of the tech partners that's been supporting the work of Ukraine in bringing justice on how they're able to collect enormous data sets, some of which are seized documents. Some of it is open source scrubbing of social media platforms. Some of it is satellite imagery. Some of it is, individual Russian perpetrators who post trophy videos on their Facebook profiles that can be immediately captured and brought into an evidence vault, and then the metadata locked down so we know it hasn't been tampered with, and then brought to the service of these cases. And seeing on a screen all of the ways in which these documents can be linked, these incidents can be linked with digital imagery, with videos that are being uploaded, with documents that have been seized and made available, and then information that is shared by other prosecutors around the world. So it really is a brave new world of international justice. And in many respects, Georgetown is at the forefront.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Mr. Prosecutor General, you used the term web of accountability in your remarks. And I do just want to say that term originated with one of our faculty members here at Georgetown, Jane Strawn-Seth. A very incisive and descriptive term. Would you like to make a few concluding remarks yourself, sir?
Yes, as we are here officially launching, yes, our project. But based on how we prepare it, and based on our previous communication, just to point out why we've been successful and why I believe that our success would be even bigger, even greater. First, we work very fast. We have no time to think long. We need to take decisions very fast. Second, we are very flexible. So immediately when we need to fix something and to change, we meet, we call, and we easily find new ways how to go ahead. And third, which is also very important, we have the same goal, and we definitely know where to go and what we need to achieve. So these three elements will lead to a success of this project. And I'm once again grateful, Clint, and all your team of Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group and all Georgetown University team, Beth, always close to us, always helping and assisting in the most crucial and difficult issues. I will tell you frankly, our communication about the ad hoc special tribunal several months ago was not very easy. And always when we were together with Beth, I really felt great support. It was very important because I was not myself. We are not yet to have a decision, but I know that being optimistic, we will have it, and then our idea will be real. So fourth element is optimism. We are optimistic starting from 24th of February. One time I said one word. Also, it also relates about tribunal. Was a big gathering in September in Kiev. And a lot of concerns, arguments against, new concerns, new arguments. And at the end of the day, I said, look, starting from 24th of February, Ukrainians believe in unbelievable. So we were in so difficult condition, but we were optimistic. We believe that we can change everything. And we changed a lot of things. If you go back in history of this year, and you will understand how dramatically political and military support changed with regard to Ukraine. So for you also take decisions fast, be flexible, be cooperative, and be optimistic. And we will have success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Ukraine, all of Ukraine is an inspiration for the world. Thank you. We have time for just a few questions before we conclude. So I'm happy to recognize anyone who would like to ask questions of anyone. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Maybe if you could stand, we probably could hear you better. So we're not naming any names.
No, that was actually. But it is. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, but we are still in the process of identifying a lot of experts that are on our roster. This is a high priority issue, as the prosecutor said earlier. We're very aware of children that have been taken from Ukraine, have been resettled in Russia, stolen from their families, effectively put into Russian families in an attempt to Russify these children, to cut all ties with Ukraine. It is a horrific crime. It is horrific. And so this is an issue that I think we're very attentive to. As we continue to build out our team, this will be an area of high priority. But like I said, unfortunately, I can't say that we have put somebody in that role yet, but it is something that we certainly will do as we continue to get more fully operational.
Question. Yes, standing up in the back there, gentlemen.
Hi, I'm from Taiwan. So, Mr. Prosecutor, this question and my support is for you and Ukraine. And the first thing is, yeah, I think I'm knocking the door to you because it should be happen. Like, I'm in a public health background, so we believe prevention is like a little bit important than treatment. But also we need to know that if we has this kind of situation, although it is unfortunate, but we should be prepared for maintain, like you say, like evidence from war criminal. So can you just give us a brief suggestion about what we can do, no matter the institution, because we have like maybe not that kind of international support if we have this kind of situation. But I also believe we have a solid legal basis in Taiwan. We have our own institution. But like, for example, be practical to maintain this kind of war criminal evidence. How should the, for example, police department work with military department? And if go back to last year, what kind of thing you think you can be prepared before it? Because everything is fast. But if you can go back before the war, what kind of thing you think we should be prepared in this safe world and peace world? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. First of all, COVID prepared us, if not well, but quite substantially for the war. We didn't expect the war. You never expected tomorrow. We can think about it, but you never expect it happen in 1 hour or tomorrow or the next day. But COVID prepared us well because we substantially invested in online communication, substantially invested in the digital possibilities of digital storage of information, etc. So first, of course, you need to keep all systems of your state, including law enforcement, keep them active. So if you have the possibility to duplicate specific storage facilities, servers, or specific connection lines, secured connection lines, this could be done. This will be not a wasted investment in any case. Second, of course, it's coordination. And it's important for all law enforcement agencies to play in a concert. Because we know different jurisdictions have different traditions, different legal system. These type of crimes are for police. These are for some special forces. These are for security. That's for others. We have the same as many other countries. But what we understand, most of the war crimes by law should be investigated by state security service. Because historically there were few and it was not their main workload. The main workload is state security at large. And now their main resources are concentrated to fight against collaborators, traitors, spies. This is their primary role. But when we understand that we need more investigators, so we ask national police and State Bureau of Investigation, so the other state investigative authority, to allocate more resources. And it's easy, we have an easy instrument when prosecutor can change the investigative authority. It should be done officially, it takes some time, but anyway, it makes then the investigation legal. So if we come back to what's going on at the moment, so for instance, missile attack and destroyed object of critical civil infrastructure or a residential house, people could be wounded or killed. So immediately, this is what it happened automatically, practically. So national police, the rescue services, because they are under the same Ministry of Internal Affairs with national police, so they go first. National police, investigator from the State Security Service, prosecutor, and if we need immediately experts, if not, experts are going later. It's important to have one coordination authority in Ukraine. This is Office of Prosecutor. So it's more or less easy because in every region, prosecutor knows whom to arrange. And this is about war crimes which are committed on, not on daily basis, but every day, let's say like this. So new. For other situation, when we liberated territory and we find the atrocities committed before, then this also under the coordination of the prosecutors. So we have very good actually experience in Kharkiv region, which was liberated in September. We have a big coordination meeting of all law enforcement agencies and prosecutors together with local authorities actually. And then we prepared mobile investigative groups where investigator, prosecutor, police officer, forensic expert, and they go to the places where they have information about potential war crimes committed. So, and in Kharkiv region, we have 28 groups which work in parallel every day in different locations. So we have a lot of experience. And what is also important, with the help of our experts from Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group, we are preparing strategy of investigation of war crimes. This will be a big handbook how we investigate and prosecute them. This is under completion. We need probably 1-2 months to finalize it. And this will be a handbook for Ukrainian prosecutors and investigators. But knocking our door, we can share this, of course, with everyone who will ask us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor General. I'd like now to invite Dean Traynor to make some closing remarks.
I'd like to thank Professor Donahue, who started the National Security Group. It's really made all of this possible. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank our speakers, both for this conversation and what they're doing to combat war atrocities in Ukraine. So Director Cave, Ambassador Williamson, Ambassador Bucha, Professor Regan, and of course, Prosecutor Kostin. So a round of applause. Justice for Ukraine is an imperative international priority. And we must provide accountability for the devastation that is occurring in Ukraine, the lives that are being lost, and the families that are being torn apart. We are grateful, we at Georgetown are grateful for the confidence that the State Department has placed in our Center on National Security to lead this initiative to help provide accountability and for the support that it is providing us. And we are all mindful of the tremendous responsibility that we have assumed to help Ukraine seek justice for the atrocities that are occurring. And I can assure you that we will be tireless in our commitment to meeting this responsibility. And as we carry out that responsibility, we'll bear in mind what Professor Regan said, and that is absolutely true and powerful. Ukraine is an inspiration to the world. Thank you all.